Good morning, Instagram. Jill Williamson here with an author life video. Okay, so I've spent the last 14 months of my life in grad school earning a master's in teaching so that I could be a teacher. And I just finished the program. It was intense. It made it almost impossible to write novels because I was, in classes and doing student teaching and all the things like that. But I got through it, and now I'm able to write again for the first time in a really long time, write my own novels. And well, last fall I released Thirst, which is the first in the Thirst duology and prequel to the Safelands trilogy, which I don't have here to hold up, but Thirst. And so that means I really need to finish this before I can write all the new ideas that I have in my head, which, knowing me, is a lot. I do have a lot of ideas, but no, I must first finish. And book 2 is Hunger, which I do have a cover and I will release it shortly. But here's how I started when I needed to get myself back in to writing after I'd been gone for a long time. I read this book. I read it this way. And as I read my book, I did two things. I made lists of things, character traits that I might have forgotten about some of these characters, lists of things that were happening that needed to be tied up in book 2, things I didn't want to forget. And then after I finished reading this, I opened my computer and I read what I had of Hunger. Now, I don't know if any of you know this, but I wrote Thirst and Hunger as one book on my blog several years ago for my readers for fun. And then I revamped it on the Go Teen Writers as a lesson for how to write a book in a year. And I used it as an example. I ended up with this 120,000 word messy rough draft of a story that was just a disaster, really. I mean, my readers were very kind and they were like, this is so fun, because they were reading a chapter a week. But when I just sat back and I looked at it, it had no plot structure. It was like half of the book was them trying to get to Mount Crested Butte area where there was supposedly clean water, because this is a post-apocalyptic story. And then the second part was like, all of a sudden there were all these new characters and there was these people trying to be bossy and make a government, and my characters were fighting against it, and it didn't flow. You can't have a bunch of new characters halfway through the book in a whole new story. So I thought, gosh, that's really 2 books is what I probably should do. And that is what started the Thirst duology. So Thirst became Thirst and Hunger. That said, I had divided the manuscript, fixed this part up, and released it last fall, and I had the Hunger half to mess with, about 40,000 words, and I read through that. After I read through this and took notes, I read through what I had of Hunger, and I also made lists for Hunger, things that I needed, things that were plot holes. I had notes from my readers at the time, because when I was posting chapters on the blog, readers were leaving comments and asking questions, so I had that list. And then I added my own list of things that I needed to tie up. Gosh, dear readers, I don't know what that ending was that I put on there. It makes no sense. I was reading it and laughing. I was like, wow, I posted this on my blog. Like, anyway, we won't go into that. But clearly there was some holes that I needed to figure out. So when I was reading Hunger, I made cards for each scene so that I could lay them out. And when I finished, I laid them out on the floor of my living room, and then I started looking at it and thinking, okay, I need to make this better. It needs its own plot structure. What am I going to do? Well, I've been working on a top secret project for Go Teen Writers, in which I learned a little bit about a new plot structure that I had never heard about before. It was popularized by Dan Wells of the Writing Excuses podcast, and he discovered it from a Star Trek narrator's guide for role-playing games, which I just thought was fabulous. Anyway, it's called the 7-point story structure, and I had been learning about it, so I thought, I'm going to try the 7-point story structure out on Hunger and see what happens. So I had my cards out, and the 7-point story structure has a list of things. It has an opening, an ending, and pinch points, and midpoints. Anyway, it has these 7 elements. So I went through and tried to figure out what those would be to start. And then I used this chart. I made this chart, which is, there's videos on YouTube about Dan Wells teaching the 7-point plot structure. So if you went on YouTube and you typed in Dan Wells 7-point plot structure, you'll find the videos and you could watch them. But he made a chart like this for the Matrix and showed how it worked. And it's very similar to the concept of list weaving, in which you make lists of different plots and then weave them together, which is something that I did for the Kinsman Chronicles because it was so epic and huge. So what I've got here is a list of different plots. So I have an action story. I have the Eli Jaylee plot thread. I have an Eli's character growth plot thread. And then I have one for Hannah, who I needed to have one for. I don't want to give spoilers. Those of you who have read The Safe Lens might have a clue who Hannah is. But anyways, so these are my 4 main plot threads that I need to track. And so I went through and I made a list of scenes. I used my cards and I wrote those all in. And then most of it I did on the computer. So I added in more things that needed to happen. And I tried to, what's cool about this is you could put them in order, like chronologically, how they'd have to go. And this is 4 pages long. So it keeps going for 4 pages. And I have all of the 7 points in there, the midpoint and the ending and the pinch points. I have those in here, and then I can try to see what's happening with these other plot threads at the same time and shift things around so that my story's arc and my story's tension and all those things are matching really well and flowing, and I have a good pacing. So I did this, and then I felt really excited when I got to this point, because when I first read the draft of Hunger, I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. I want to read a news story, because frankly, Hunger was in the terrible 2 stage instead of the newborn baby stage where it's all beautiful and the child can do no wrong. And I didn't want to deal with the unruly toddler. But once I dealt with the unruly toddler, I was feeling better. But there were still some problems. So the next thing I did was make calendars, and you can go to freeprintablecalendars.com or whatever, and it doesn't matter what year they are really. But I needed to try to figure out how much time all this was taking, because I really didn't know. I mean, I had different morning party meetings, and morning parties happen every Monday in my book, and that's when the rock stars gather everybody together and give them the new rules of the land. And so I was like, gosh, how many morning parties do I have? So making this 2-month chart, it ended up being 2 months. I was able to jot down all the morning parties, and then I was like, okay, wow, gosh, this is 9 weeks. This story's taking place in 9 weeks. That's longer than I thought it was, because this book was 2 days. So you see what I'm talking about? How could that have been one book? Like, we had 2 days that takes half the story, and then 9 weeks that takes the other half the story. So 2 books, much better. So yeah, this took 9 weeks once I did a calendar, and then I was like, okay, so I can have some serious things happening here that build up over that much time, which is good, because I'm trying to add some relationship growth here, and that, you know, that happens in 9 weeks, doesn't really happen in 2 days. It's quite the same way. So once I had the dates down, I was able to plot these other things in on the calendar. Then I went in and I said, okay, so when did these other things happen? And I went through and I added as much as I could. And then I had my list from what I needed to add. Then I went and checked and made sure I had those on this chart. And then I made sure I put them on this calendar. So all that said, once I had my documents ready, I was ready to start writing. And I decided for Hunger to make it a 2 point of view book, which, you know, I just like to get myself into trouble. And so then I got to write some of Hannah's point of view instead of just Eli, and that was fun too. So basically, I'm rewriting the book. I open 2 documents and I copy and paste what I want into the new document instead of just fixing everything, because it was a mess. And that's what I've been doing, and it's been really fun, and I'm not very far along, but I'm making good progress, and I'm excited and hopeful that Hunger will be just as exciting as Thirst, and soon I will do a cover reveal and you'll get to see what they look like side by side, and I'm very excited. Emily at Create, Explore, Read did an amazing job on both of these covers. So that is a little bit of my author life and how I plot and get writing a new book after I've been away for a while. Hope that was helpful.